So now we're going to move on to our second topic, which is clinical trial transparency. Priya?
Yes, thank you, Denise. So let's look at the requirements here in the new version. Here, transparency, defined in the guidelines really includes these items. So transparency is addressed in both the principles section and in Annex 1. It includes timely registrations on public databases, timely posting of results, availability of essential records for the retention period, which is no longer expressed as a definite period of time, but it refers to the local requirements. So there's a need to go deeper into understanding those local requirements. And then also it includes, you'll see here, the communication of trial results to participants in a non-promotional way, and also communication of treatment assignments to participants in blinded studies if they desire it. So it's really very clear how it's broken down, transparency requirements here. Denise, I think we have a poll question here that we want to launch, right? So let's see what the audience thinks here.
So, yeah, we were really curious if your organization has a process for communicating treatment assignments to clinical trial participants. So, Tracy, I'm not sure how that poll will come up. Or, oh, there we go. All right. So, actually, that is our second poll, maybe. Is that, do you have the first one there, Tracy?
I do. Sorry about that. One moment here.
All right. So we're curious, does your organization have a process for communicating treatment assignments? Yes, no, or not yet, but you're developing one. If you could just quickly click on a response there. And then I don't know, Tracy, where will we get the results for that?
I'll just end the poll now.
Okay. Oh, there we go. So about 29% of you do have a process for this, about 57% don't, and some of you are developing it. So that's interesting. I think maybe more people have a process than I thought would have it. I remember having a process like years and years ago, but I work with a lot of sponsors that do not have a process for this now. And so let's talk about some challenges with with transparency here. So one challenge is simply the fact that we used to have a process for registering protocols and putting results on clinicaltrials.gov. Now we have one that covers like a whole bunch of different regions, including the EU. And so at many smaller sponsors, ClinOps was actually responsible for clinicaltrials.gov posts. But typically regulatory handles CTIS submissions. So it really makes more sense to have regulatory handle this for everybody, right? So some sponsors might find that they need to harmonize their procedures. And, we work with a lot of sponsors that have been struggling with this for a couple of years, especially smaller companies. They just don't reach the end of studies very often, right? So sometimes they forget to post their results on time. So now they have to post them in a couple of different places. We also have some new requirements for ICF language. So GCP says that the ICF must include a statement to the effect that the trial may be registered on publicly accessible databases. No specific language is required, unlike the US regulation that has a specific statement that must be produced word for word about clinicaltrials.gov. And so one pitfall that we see is that recently we've seen a lot of ICFs where they try to smash the two statements together. And this is not a great idea because the US statement must be reproduced word for word. So if you try to combine the two, then you're going to be out of compliance in the US. So a small challenge, but a real issue that we've seen. But where I think sort of the unknown is, we're going to need to determine whether participants want to be informed about their treatment assignments, right? GCP clearly says that. So do we need to train investigators to include this as part of the consent process? Would we expect to see it documented in the source? So do we need to train monitors to look for it now as they look for other bits of the informed consent discussion to be documented? Or should we be capturing it in the consent form? And then what happens if they change their minds about that? Just kind of introduces a whole bunch of complications. Then we have to think about how we are distributing the treatment assignments. And those of you that have processes, I'm sure the rest of us would love to know how you do this. Are we waiting for the CSR to be final and then sending that to the sites? Or are we sending just a list of treatment assignments to each site? And then, how are we QCing that to make sure that it's accurate? Because that would not be good if we had an inaccurate, listing go out. If it's a study with a long-term follow-up, are we having the site monitors check the source to see if the sites actually did communicate the treatment assignment? And then the last challenge here is about communicating trial results to participants in a non-promotional way. The easiest way to do this would be to have the sites inform the participants to go to CTIS or clinicaltrials.gov and look up the results. But Priya was telling me the other day that she's working with some sponsors that send out like a short communication to the sites. And Priya, you can chime in if I'm getting that wrong. So do those communications have to be IRB approved? Are they going to be reviewed by your promotional review board? Just a whole bunch of questions that, are not insurmountable, but we need to work out.
Yes, indeed, St. Denise, just to add a little bit there, this is quite tactical, right? So the sponsor needs to tell the sites, and then the sites need to think about how they're going to further communicate. So there's a cascade, and that has to be controlled. And the messaging has to be right as well, but also understandable, right, by the study participants as well. So even though it's just a small letter or however that you decide to do it, it can be quite a task that needs coordination, perhaps review by the regulatory team, legal team, IRB, so lots of considerations. And especially if you put this in the hopper with the understanding local requirements piece, which we talked about just a moment ago, this could become a nice gesture, but becomes quite an operational task to really manage well. Yeah.
Good point. Yes. All right. So Priya, do you want to talk about some possible inspection questions?
Yeah, thank you. So again, here you're seeing an image of the Ready Room tool, and you can see here some of the questions that could come up in this topic around transparency, which could be around, what is your process for determining registration reporting requirements for a new clinical study? Often I find clients that I work with get stuck between, whose responsibility is this? And then have they done it, right? That's always a challenge. Another question could be, what process was followed to verify that communications with participants were non-promotional? So here you go. This means there needs to be a review involved here somewhere. And then another question could be, how were treatment assignments and clinical trial results communicated to the participants? So these are the types of questions that could come up.
So this is the kind of storyboard we might envision. We actually developed this storyboard now for clinicaltrials.gov postings, but this just reflects an expanded process for determining requirements.